It was nominated by Councillor Proud and seconded by Councillor Duckett for Councillor Davis to be chair. No other nominations? Show of hands in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you.
Okay, everybody, thank you for that. In anticipation, I didn't get the laptop out, but I will now. So welcome, everybody. It's a fairly full agenda, but hopefully we can get through it. Just as a explanation, I have put round on in front of everyone just a paper that went to the working group, which hasn't been included, but I'm assured would be included further down the process. But I just wanted to kind of outline, but the discussion as it went, and anyone who was there can argue with me, was that this was what we expected the information about the towns to be about. But we also said it would need a map because there are those who aren't yet digitally fully enabled. But on the understanding, if you like, that the former group who are is growing, that the bulk of it needs to go there rather than into something which will become less and less used and also requires a considerable input in terms of printing and things like that. So when we get to that, that's what that paper is. And it's very much in a kind of formative stage. So any apologies? Oh yes, I have to read out the PERDA statement. Members will be aware that we are in a pre-election period with the general election being held on the 4th of July 24. Whilst the business of the council continues, we need to be mindful of avoiding giving an individual or a political group a platform by which they can influence public opinion in the lead up to the election. So can you just be mindful of that during today's proceedings? And if myself or Paul feels that somebody's overstepping, we will kind of step in. But you'll note we haven't got the MP here today, obviously, for that reason. No. Our former MP is not here. Okay, so now we get on to the election for vice chair. Arnold? Councillor Warnican. Councillor Warnican. Seconded by Cameron. Are there any other nominations? Okay, all in favour? Any against? Abstentions? Okay. There you go, Kirsty. Unanimous. So then we get to item 4, which is the minutes of the meeting of the 26th of April. And just a reminder that it's only the accuracy of these at the moment that we can discuss. Any items on the accuracy of those, or anybody want to propose any changes or omissions? No? Okay, then we'll take those as approved. Then we get to declarations of interest. Anyone got any? Councillor Arthur.
Yes, Chair. In item number 8, Stronger Communities Update, it mentions Upper Yorkshire. I represent Upper Yorkshire on this committee.
Okay, thank you. Any others? Okay, fine, thank you very much. Then item 6 is public questions or statements. Paul?
None received, Chair.
None received. Okay. Actually, we do have someone here from Brayton Parish Council here, really just observing. Okay, that's fine, thanks. Item 7 is Northern Power Grid. and that's on pages 15 to 28 of your papers. And Katie Privet is going to do a presentation. Thank you, Katie.
Hi there, everyone. My name's Katie Privet. I'm the Regional Insights Manager at Northern Power Grid. And I'm here today just to give you a bit of a background as to what Northern Power Grid do, how we work with local authorities. There we go. And how we sort of fit into your decarbonisation plans as a council. I'll just await the slide sharing. Apologies, I was not able to join online myself, so Dawn is helping me out. Thank you, Dawn.
We're used to a few IT glitches in this room, so don't worry. We're getting better. It's no one's fault.
Next slide, please. Thank you. So who are Northern Power Grid and what do we do? So we are responsible for moving electricity around at the distribution level. So that's lower voltages. If you think about the electricity system in the same way that you would roads, we're not responsible for the big stuff moving down motorways, but we are your A roads, your B roads, your driveways. We move the power, we own and operate the cables, but we don't buy or sell any of the power, and we don't as I say, do any of the extra high voltage stuff that is part of the transmission system, so the National Grid transmission system. We cover from the Scottish borders down to the northern tip of Derbyshire and bits of North Lincolnshire. We aim to be an enabler of a net zero society by making sure the infrastructure is in place to allow people to switch to more environmentally friendly and lower carbon sources of power and heat and transport over the coming years. We're a regulated monopoly, so we are although you can only choose your distribution network operator by going to a different area, by moving to a different area, we are the people that have the wires. We plan in 5-year business cycles and are regulated by Ofgem. So everything we do is within Ofgem's regulatory framework. And we are now in our 2nd year. I did spot a typo that I didn't get to fix before I sent it over to Dawn. We're in the 2nd year of our ED2, which is Electricity Distribution 2 business planning period. So the 2nd time we've gone around this five-year cycle with Ofgem. Next slide, please. So what do we do for our customers? So our customers are everybody that lives and works in that big map area that we showed you before. We facilitate growth and decarbonisation by making sure that power is there for you to be able to do things. We plan for and invest in a safe and reliable network. That's our number one, really. We want power to be there, to be available, but also to make sure that it is safe for everybody involved. We provide connections to the network, so if there's a new area that you're investing in, that you're moving into, or simply that you've got a new home being built at the end of your road, or a new industrial estate, we provide those new connections to the network. We support vulnerable customers and communities. We have a priority services register, and we do lots of additional things for vulnerable people in our area to make sure that those that require extra support around power outages or planned works are getting that extra support so that they are not unduly affected by any works we have to do on the system. And we want to minimise our impact on cost of living and doing business in the region. So all of our decision making has to be based on cost optimal solutions, as that is part of our remit from Ofgem. We put in to Ofgem in our ED2 business plan that we wanted to spend more money on making sure the network was fit for the future, and they did turn around and say, although we see that there's a benefit there, our number one priority now is keeping bills stable. So we had to scale back our plans in the original ED2 business case to make sure that that bill stability and that little percentage of a pence that goes on each of our bills to the electricity distribution network was kept stable. So on growth and decarbonisation, so a few things that's worth highlighting. We treat all applicants equally. So we are obliged by our regulator to make a connection offer to anyone that applies for a connection to our network. We don't say no. If you ask us, we won't say no. We might say it's going to take this much time, or it's going to cost this much money, or those two together, but we will not say no if you ask for a connection to our network. The connection queue, the people that are waiting for a connection, whether that's for a demand connection, so where you're wanting to draw power off the network, or a generation, where you're wanting to generate power and put it into our network, it doesn't favour any type of applicant over another, and it doesn't favour any type of technology over another. We are bound to be technology agnostic and to give equal footing to each person in our queue. We are trying our best to speed up and reduce the cost of customer connections. We are trying and succeeding on that front. So we have got lots of opportunities to speed up connections for those. You may well have heard about the connections queue, especially when we're talking about generation projects, about wanting to generate particularly renewable energy or to have battery storage projects. A lot of those are falling into a queue system where we have limited opportunity to generate on at our distribution level before we start impacting the transmission level. And the transmission level is very congested at the moment. Lots of wind farms up in Scotland, lots of people wanting power down south. Everything in between gets sort of clogged up because of that. We can't be putting too much into that pipe from a transmission level. So there is a connections queue when it comes to generation at higher volumes. We are working with National Grid to figure out what is the actual state of play at all of our connection points to them, at our grid supply points and our bulk supply points, the points where our distribution and transmission systems interact. And we're now able to offer time-limited curtailable connections. So being able to say, you want to have a megawatt of, maybe you want to have 2 megawatts of solar, where we will say you can only actually export a quarter of that for the next 2 years before the works are done. And then after that point, you will be able to export the remainder of that. So that would be a time-limited curtailable connection. As possibility within that, we may even be able to offer more in that time. So we say you can have 1 megawatt of that, but we have the right to turn around and say you're going to have to switch that off for a bit. In the contracts, it will be you can export that 90% of the time or 80% of the time, and we'll come up with a contract with you that allows that flexibility. So that's just to say we recognise that the historic system of the top-down energy system is changing, and we are making sure that our practices and policies change with it. We are not still in a situation where power is generated at high voltages and flows down into everybody's homes. It's coming in from all parts of the system, from solar on your rooftop to wind turbines on the edge of school playing fields, and it's all sort of coming into the same system. Next slide, please. So on decarbonisation, what are we doing to help meet the challenge of decarbonisation in our region? So one element that we have is our flexibility service. So flexibility is a term that means we are encouraging people to generate or take power off the system with market mechanisms in a way that means we don't have to do reinforcement right that moment, either because we can't from a technical or a skills or a supply chain level, or because we're not sure that a constraint on that system will be long-lived. So we don't want to waste taxpayer money by going in and doing lots of upgrades, putting a load of wires and cables in the ground to find that a few years later that demand was short-lived, and that's a waste of money. We don't want to do that. So we invest in flexibility mechanisms to deal either with short-term supply chain issues or to deal with issues that we think will be perfectly fine with a bit of flexibility to cover off that discrepancy between what we can confidently provide in our system and what we might not be able to provide going forward. So the idea of flexibility is we could enter into contracts and do enter into contracts with supermarkets, for example, to say in the middle of the winter, when we know that draw on our electricity network is going to be at its highest, say, I don't know, between 4 and 6 in the evening on a weekday, could you turn your fridges down, make them take less power? By 1 degree or 2 degrees, it should have no effect on the performance and the safety of the food in the fridges and the freezers, but is quite a major power draw. So we're able to say with customers like that, turn up or turn down your usage or your generation, and that can help flatten out the peaks and troughs in our network. You may also have seen it doing it a little bit more at the low voltage now. So you may have seen energy aggregators, as we call them from a flexibility point of view, but basically people like your energy companies who can influence the behavior of lots of people in one go. So people like your Octopuses and your Ovos saying to their customers, there's a saving session or something in this hour, do you mind using less electricity? And they aggregate all of that together, and it has that effect on our system of flattening out the peaks and troughs. We have our Community Distribution System Operator project, Community DSO, as you may have heard of it. The idea of our network is that, as I say, we've been working in a system where power is generated high up and taken out at the bottom of the pipe. What we're looking at now is more innovative solutions to allow sort of local hubs of power flexibility. So being able to have people within a street or people within a village acting collaboratively to balance the grid at their own substation level. That's something that regulation has not allowed us to do. So it's an innovation project, and we're trialing something that hopefully we can use and spread further and further. So if you are interested in a project like that, do come and see me, or I'm sure Dawn can pass on my details and I can put you in touch. If you know a community that's really keen on taking more ownership of their power usage and generation and want to be able to do more in that space, our Community DSO project can help them do that. We are trying to use data and monitoring to get a more observation of our existing network and how everything in it performs. I mentioned safety earlier. A safe and reliable network is our #1 concern. And so to do that, we make assumptions on how different new technologies will act on our system when we plug them in. What we don't want to do is melt the wires and have everybody's power go out and have to come in and dig up the roads and fix something. We don't want stuff to break. However, there's a possibility that with the limited amount of information we have, the limited intelligence we have on some of these technologies, that our design assumptions are a bit too conservative, and maybe we're being too there's a possibility that with more data and more evidence of how they actually perform in the real world, we can actually start to be slightly less conservative in those assumptions and get more of those technologies onto our network with an increased confidence that that still is not going to cause any issues on our network. So it's about that balance between the safety and the speed of delivery of net zero, and we think that data is going to help us fill that gap. Hence why we are putting more and more low voltage monitoring and using smart meter data to interrogate this change. We're investing where it's needed in network reinforcement and expansion. So I've mentioned flexibility. Flexibility first is our approach. However, we know that flexibility isn't going to do everything we need to for this decarbonising world. And so we're making sure that in those areas where it's low regrets, we're getting in and reinforcing our network appropriately. And importantly in all of this, and the reason why I'm here today, we work closely with local authorities and other stakeholders who are coordinating low carbon technology rollouts. We want to make this a collaborative approach as much as possible. It can often be really difficult to navigate the electricity connection system, and we are wanting to try and demystify it as much as possible. There's lots of change that's happened and continues to happen over the past few years, and something that you maybe were told was the case even a year and a half ago might not be the case today. So it's always worth keeping those conversations open and having those frank discussions about how deliverability of projects changes over time. Next slide, please. This is just a few numbers for you to show that we've got a lot of stuff in our pipeline as far as connections are concerned. We've actually approved connections for, I think it's something like 7 times more projects, generation projects, than in 23-24 than we did in 2020-2021. That is the massive increase in generation projects coming into our patch, into the Northern Power Grid area. And we are assessing these projects, and as they come in, they're either ready to connect, so the network is absolutely fine, yeah, go ahead, plug them in. That nearly half of our projects are in that space. A few more of them require us to do works. So our distribution network operator needs to do work on our system to make them work. But as you see, there is still this big pot, almost the same size as that ready to connect, that either are under review with requiring reinforcement at the transmission level, or will require reinforcement at the transmission level. So that's just to give you a bit of context about where things are getting held up, and frankly how much is still able to come online in our patch, which is encouraging. Next slide, please. I wanted to give you a quick idea of some of the timelines that we're working to. So we have different types of connection journeys and connection timelines based on how big the thing is you're trying to put on, and how robust the network is in that area. They're your 2 main factors, really. So if you're putting a couple of solar panels or a heat pump onto a home, you'll have minimal network impact. An engineer, not one of our engineers, an engineer who comes to fit your heat pump or to fit your EV charger, can do all the calculations themselves, can do the checks themselves, and in most cases you don't need to engage with us other than to say we've connected it, and this piece of technology is in play at this organisation, and your engineer who installs it will do that on your behalf as a homeowner. If it's quite a few solar panels or EV chargers in a car park or something, but there's capacity available to connect, there'll probably still need to be some works done. So some pipes laid, some cables laid, some infrastructure put in. That could take around 6 months. That tends to be our lead time on projects like that. If it's a new development of a decent size, should we say? So maybe a new housing development or a medium to large size renewable generation. We can probably bring a flexible solution within 12 months, but it might not be the full solution that you are expecting within that 12 months. So we'll probably bring you something, but not all of it within that 12-month period. And you may have to wait a little longer to get the full rollout, depending on, as you've seen, the issues with the transmission system. And if there's significant reinforcement required at our area, which may that may be something like a social housing rollout. If you are looking to take 90% of properties in an estate to heat pumps over the next year, that's significant change on our network and is likely to require us digging up the roads, reinforcing our cables, potentially even new substations or substation upgrades, should I say. That can be anywhere between 6 months and 6 to 12 months at that sort of low voltage level, and if we're getting to the higher voltage, the bigger stuff, you're looking at 2+ years to get those sorts of things done. So I just wanted to give a view there that not everything takes a long time, but to give you an assessment of the types of projects that take the types of time that you might be expecting there. I've just a couple more slides, please, Dawn. Thank you. Connections costs. So our prices are regulated by Ofgem. And they are reflective of real cost. There is competition in connections. So a lot of the stuff we have to do on our network ourselves, but not all of it. So there are independent connection providers in the space and independent distribution network operators who can work with us, but can potentially do a lot of you might hear the term contestable works. Contestable works can be done either by us as your regional DNO or by an independent body that are certified to work with our network and have all of the appropriate certifications to do that, but may be able to provide a cost saving for you. And then there's the case of all of the works I've been talking about. If you want to connect to our network, something has to be done and some infrastructure has to be built. So that has to be charged to someone. So there's been a change since April 2023 in how connections charges are distributed, and more of that cost has been socialised. So I mentioned the fraction of a pence on a bill. That will have gone up fractionally based on the changes that came in April 2023. And so more of those reinforcement costs are spread across all of our customers rather than just the person wanting to connect. That's not the case for the single-use stuff. So if you are building a new housing estate and you will still need to pay for all of the wires and substations and connections that serve only that housing estate. But if the putting of a housing estate in that place means that we have to upgrade the substation above it and the one above that, those costs will not be borne solely by you as the developer. Depending on the complexity and the size, you may have to pay some of that, or it may all be socialised. There's some good maths there if anybody's interested later. I've got a whole different slide deck. I appreciate the shaking of the head. Thank you. So how do we work with local authorities? So we, you'll see on my little sign here, I'm part of the Regional Insights team. We work with local authorities on all of their projects that are going to affect the speed of rollout of low carbon technologies on our network. So the major ones that you'll be aware of: local electric vehicle infrastructure fund, LEVI, social housing decarbonisation fund, and public sector decarbonisation scheme. For each of those types of programs, we can be involved at a really early stage, so helping bidders understand our network, understand how we work, and the timelines that we work to, as I put out in the previous slide, and understand the spatial granularity of that. Where is something going to be easier or more difficult to develop in a particular time period? And then we can also handhold through the application process and through into delivery as well. Some of these schemes are dealing with hundreds, if not thousands, of individual properties, and the tracking of that within our internal system, which was set up to deal with one person at a time, can get very complicated. So our regional insights team are there to help you and handhold you through that process and help in the interim before we have a better internal solution to do a lot of that sort of work on pulling all of those together, so you have good visibility of where all of your projects and programs are up to. We also support on local area energy planning. York and North Yorkshire have a local area energy plan, and we are at the moment trying to pull data from that into our distribution future energy scenarios. Basically, my team feeds information and intelligence to our system forecasting team. The forecasting team then tell the rest of the business, the flexibility elements, the network reinforcement elements, how the network's going to change over the next 3, 5, 10, 20 years. And they start on projects for those shorter terms, those 3, 5, 10 years. They start the reinforcement work based on what system forecasting tell them. So if you tell me there's going to be a large uptake in solar panels in this particular borough or this particular area because we are applying for money, it's in a local strategy, there's been a feasibility project that's been signed off, the budgets are being signed off internally. If we've got that increasing levels of confidence and we can see it's coming through, we feed back to our forecasting team and say, make sure that the network is ready in this area, because this is not theoretical demand and it's not the uniform spread that our forecasting, our distribution feature energy scenarios is really clever, but it works off demographies. So it works off who they think can afford what technology where, and where attitudes are likely to cause people to flip from one technology type to another. A lot of the work that a council does is actually based on trying to even that out. So trying to bring those who are less able to participate in a decarbonising society and not have them left behind. So that is something that our modelling does not automatically do. So we need to be feeding that in as a regional insights team, and we are doing that this year. And we can also provide support in using our network data. We have loads of network data online, but unless you're really nerdy, you might not have gone and had a look at it all and jumped around all of our exciting maps, let alone necessarily understood exactly what that means for you and your projects. So we're there to help you with that journey. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Testing. Yeah, it's working. So, I could have a whole afternoon conversation with you, and I'm not going to hog the floor. But what I'm going to say is, firstly, thank you for coming. I really want to give a case study which involves me, but involves a whole of my. I don't own the village, but the whole of that community as well, because they're experiencing similar problems, and I'm concerned because a lot of emphasis is put on new installations, and I have experienced really bad problems with an existing installation. I've got EV charging points. This is at home. Mm-hmm. I've got solar panels and battery storage. Basically, at weekends, I'm off grid. Mm-hmm. During the week when I'm working, I fire up the lighting in my warehouses, etc., the machinery. And I haven't got enough battery storage to run them, so I have to rely on some of the grid. Mm-hmm. For the last 5 months, now I'm stressing that because I would have thought I'd got a better result by now. For the last 5 months, I've experienced outage. Right. To the level of 145 volts, when I've been told anything below 206, 207 is unacceptable and dangerous. 145 volts, where voltage goes down, the current goes up. Mm-hmm. Burnt my heating system in the house, the wiring, because it got dropped so low and the current got so high. And I've been made to feel guilty by the operatives by criticising people that have EV charging points and air source heat pumps. So I'm really concerned that the whole of the community that I live in is not being encouraged by you as an organisation that has a decarbonisation plan to actually help us with that. And I am struggling as a householder and business person to run my business on what has been provided in terms of service. So after nearly 6 months, I would have thought that problem would have been resolved, and it hasn't. And
Okay.
every other week, I'm on the phone waiting because I've been told by the operatives you have to raise another case again. The same problem, but I have to keep raising it. I've been promised a generator for 4 months. I haven't seen a generator. Don't really want a generator that runs on diesel. I've been trying to decarbonise, but and to keep the business going without having problems, you know, we create dangerous problems as well, because a bit of machinery that kicks in with a low outage stalls and the operative could get injured. So I just think there's a lack of awareness of existing setups rather than focusing on new installations. On a positive note, within my division, I'm working with 2 villages for local energy generation. So I'm really glad I'm here today, for not just for this reason, but for other reasons as well, that your community DSO projects, I wasn't aware of that. And so I'm going to advise those 2 communities to investigate this further. I don't want special treatment because I'm here, but I'm just giving you a case study where it's not working quite right. And I'd like to know, you know, how you think it could be improved, because I can't, as a community, be in an isolated situation. There must be happening all over the place where the outage is a problem. Thank you.
Can I just ask you, Kate, just to give a sort of fairly quick answer to Councillor Warnick initially, but obviously because it is a personal issue, obviously you've now made the connection. Yeah. Yeah, no. I know you're not raising it as a personal thing, but if you like, it's a part of Selby that isn't. And I'm quite sure it will happen in other areas. I don't want to stifle debate, but we've got other things to get through, and I think you have a particular, you know, a discussion to be had. I mean, you know, so if you could just give a quick answer for now.
Yeah, I really appreciate you raising your frustrations. I can't pretend to know about your specific situation, but it's definitely something we could pick up offline if you wanted. If you felt that you are not getting the response that you need, then that is obviously a disappointment to us as a business, and so we would like to capture that. It's a really good point you raise about the resilience of rural network. The nature of the way our grid is set up is that if you're on the end of a wire, you are not benefiting from as much resilience as if you were closer to the substations. It is something we are looking to improve. I can't give you a specific answer on why it's taking this long. All I would say is we are trying our utmost to address that reinforcement need, and it would be interesting from a regional insights point of view to see at your village level what the maths behind the assumptions have been that have meant that we have not necessarily gone in and upgraded that part of the network. When I talked about monitoring earlier, it may be that we don't have low voltage monitors on your particular substation. So we have rolled out 30,000, 30,000+, but we've got another tens of thousands to do in the next few years.
And that's just maybe that if we swap emails,
yeah,
if we can put you in contact, Arnold, via email, yes, yeah, yeah, okay.
It's not an isolated situation, and there may be other members here that might want to hear the response to that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think it's a completely valid point. Councillor Lunn?
Got it working. Thank you. Our grid was originally designed almost like a funnel where big smaller, 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 smaller. And the problem is when we get generation from homes, etc., it doesn't feed in well. Two possible solutions to this. One is increase the capacity at the wrong end to feed stuff in. But the other one, we had a planning situation yesterday where Moto were applying for some a solar farm, basically to supply their own thing, and they want to do another 80 EV charging points. And we said we were minded to pass it. There's some other details to go through, but that could also be a solution where people do things outside the grid. Do you have any way of encouraging people? I know it's against your business plan, but do you have any way of encouraging people to do things outside the grid? Thank you.
We do. So Motor is a really interesting example area, and other motorway service areas fall into this. They've got to put in a lot of EV charge points over the next years in places that are by design far away from everything else. And as we've mentioned, that means they're at the end of networks. So they are a really interesting case study, and we're specifically working with Office for Zero Emission Vehicles, National Highways, and the motorway service area operators themselves. So I've had some really productive conversations with Moto. And I mentioned that thing about flexible connections and curtailable connections. That flexibility can be at the demand side as well. So if Moto come to us and they say, we need 6 megawatts of connection here, and we've only got 1 or half, we will say to them, okay, well, we can squeeze another half a megawatt out between now and 2030, for example. Or, no, it would be faster than that, 2026, for example. And we will start work now on what needs to be done so that we are working towards that 6 megawatt goal, for example. Now, those with a bit of land and a bit of financial backing are able to go, okay, I see that you can give us that. We're going to put behind the meter solutions like our own solar farm. Particularly, you note that generation at that point, if that was to feed into our grid there, we're in the same position. That's too much power coming through wires that are not set up for it. However, there are now solutions on the market to be able to regulate flow so that you are not exporting more than the grid can cope with. They're quite new solutions, and they're not widely used, but they do exist. So we're coming up with ways that people like Moto and the other motorway service operators can generate on site, use as much of it as they can on site, potentially even have on site storage, battery storage, and can use as much of that behind the meter as possible, because it's helpful for us as well. It's helpful to be able to allow them to start investing in this and not have to wait for us to catch up. So we see the value of that, and we're really happy to work with organisations like Moto to deliver those solutions and bring them forward.
Councillor Duckett.
I thought for a minute I'd got another one. Right, I was just wondering how you work sort of with planning on the new estates coming up, because we have an estate stuck on the end of the village, one of the villages I represent, regularly have power outages. I'm talking 4 and 5 a day they're having, and it doesn't seem to get any better. Land has been put forward for another 400 to be added onto the back of that. Now, if we've already got problems there, and it's probably because they're furthest away from the station, surely, at some point you're going to have to be contacted to say, look, we're going to have a new substation or whatever for these new houses as well, to try to improve the situation on both. At what point do you sort of get involved with this? Do you suddenly get presented with the houses are going up next week, or, how early are you brought into the equation?
So that's a really good question. Traditionally, we have known about stuff coming onto our network when people put in an application. And usually you put in an application, and for big things, the first thing you will get back is, okay, we will need to do a design study, and that will cost us 300 quid to do. So pay us 300 quid and we'll do the design study. So a lot of people don't want to put in an application until they are very confident it's going forward, because they don't want to waste money. 300 quid is on the smaller end of our design fees. They do go up to, I think, £1,500. So we tend to see these things quite late in the pipe. And then we have to say to people, okay, well, we can bring it you in 18 months. And they quite rightly get a bit annoyed. That's why my team is here, to allow a way into the system, into that forward planning system, without having to be at a stage where you're ready to put a plan forward. So what we're doing is an exercise that we've been working with North Yorkshire councillors on, North Yorkshire council officers on in the planning department, to look at the local plan allocations and do an assessment of the impact of each of those potential points on our network. And that's a cumulative impact as well. So it may be that there's something happening on the north edge of Selby that shares a substation with the south edge of York. And actually, from our view as the network company, we can say, well, actually, although there's only 2 or 3 points here which won't have that much of an impact on our substation, because we know there's also another 4 over the barrier in in York, and it's all on the same substation, we need to flag this as a risk. What we do when we do that exercise is we then try and gather as much as we can from the officers on how likely our assumptions are correct, because we know a local plan is a very well thought out wish list, but it's still a wish list. Ideally, all of it gets built out, but we know that it doesn't always happen like that. So we get an assessment of the certainty level. How far along are each of these developments? When do we actually think they are going to connect? And we provide that to our forecasting team. Now, we are doing this for the first time systemically across our whole region this year. Last year we did it over the Teesside and Humber areas because we knew there were areas of massive change, but we recognised that we only had a team of 1.5 people at the time. We are up to a stonking 3.5 people, nearly 4. So we are massively increasing our reach on this now and being proactive in those discussions. So got a really good relationship with the planning department at North Yorkshire, and have been able to take that data and do that calculation. So that will be fed into our future energy scenarios. As I mentioned, that then feeds into our system improvement teams and our flexibility teams. It's a long game. I'm not going to pretend that you tell me something and then within a few months everything's sorted. You're looking at the types of works that will be finished in 2-3 years. But for something that's coming on, by the time you've told me about it, if you put an application in and say I want it, it gets bumped up the chain. Obviously, it becomes a connections request rather than a system improvement request. But we want to, as much as possible, avoid the problems you're finding at the woolly edges of our network as more and more low carbon technologies come on, or frankly, more and more demand from homes and businesses. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Oh, sorry, I did have you written down. Sorry, Councillor Boskett.
It's okay, Chair. It's actually not a question. It's just more to back up and support my fellow councillors. My ward is Tadcaster. We've been experiencing outages similar actually to Councillor Ducky, sometimes 5-6 a day for the past 6 months. We have got considerable works going on in the town at the moment, so we know that there's improvements by yourselves happening. It causes huge infrastructure problems, but the main concern is the impact on the businesses, which is massive. So I share Councillor Duckett's concerns. We've got planning on the agenda too, you know, how we hopefully everything will be sorted and everything will be fine, but I just wanted it to be noted that we're experiencing really serious issues too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
I suppose just a response to that, we want to do more. We really do. We are bound by our Ofgem regulations, and that means we can't do as much proactive work as we had put in our original business plan. I share your frustrations that things don't happen faster. I think one thing I can say though, from the business's point of view, is although it's frustrating in the short to medium term, I appreciate this is not what you never want to be in this situation. But hopefully those changes that we're making won't just fix things for the next 6 months, 2 years. We're working on an electricity system that was built and designed decades ago, and we need to act quickly, but within the realms of what's acceptable in the public purse as well. So hence why we end up in situations where stuff has to break for us to come fix it. The visibility of our network is improving, and hopefully we start to catch things before it breaks, so we can see there's some really cool innovation projects where we can actually see voltage drops, momentary voltage drops that should be able to signpost when something's going to break like 6 weeks in advance. So that allows us to plan works. That's very new, has not been sort of adopted business as usual yet, but we've got these sort of innovations to hopefully bring that time period down of when you are experiencing issues. But I hope that the businesses, and I really do hope that this is the case with the Tadcaster Works, see the benefits from here on out. Once all of that work has been done, they should be able to operate safely, reliably, and in a way to decarbonise, and not with the network as a barrier for that decarbonisation in the future.
Presumably there is a method for reporting these ongoing outages within the system, and that is done, and therefore that will be being monitored. But
it's continued to be reported, and it's noted. It's the reason that I wanted to note it was that other members had mentioned their issues in the area, and it was raised. It's been raised several times at town council, so I wanted it just noted.
I think all services are running to catch up at the moment, aren't they? As you said about your system being decades old, my partner works for Network Rail. He's 150 years old, so I hear this constantly. So thank you very much for coming. The information's really useful. We'll set up those email connections so that you can deal with that. But you've now had, also another couple of problems sort of logged in particular villages, and anything you can do to investigate those and just give us a bit more information would be really useful. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, if your permission, if Kate is okay, I'll share your email details with the whole of the ACC, so specific issues can be sent to you. Okay.
Could be a good thing, or maybe not.
I will just say I can't promise to fix them all. I will just lay that disclaimer down.
But at least if you're notified, having met you, it's nice when you see a face to know that there's somebody, you're not sending it into the ether. Councillor Poskett.
Sorry, it was just a different point actually. I meant to declare an interest for the next agenda item for stronger communities. I'm an employee of Tadcaster and Rural Community Interest Company. I'm really sorry, I should have done it at the time.
It's okay, any time during the meeting is fine. Right, okay, so now we're on agenda item 8, and we've got Tom Jenkinson with us just to give us that roundup of stronger communities for 23-24. Thanks, Tom. I assume we've read it. If they haven't, it's their fault.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the report is very much for information. Its intention is to give a general flavour of the strategic direction of the Stronger Communities programme over the last year. So much of the report is consistent across all the area constituency committees, and there's just that element of trying to give you a flavour of some of the activities that have been happening at a more local level. The other thing that I'd just like to mention is that I believe all members will have had an email from my new line manager, Liz Mead, just to say that I'll be trying to get in touch with everybody over the next sort of few weeks just to say hello to anybody who doesn't know me, which I think probably rules most people out. But yeah, just to say apologies for probably not being as proactive as I would have liked to have been in keeping in touch with members, but hopefully you do know where I am and would shout if you needed things. And I'll always do my best to respond. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tom. Questions? Look at that. Really none at all? Okay, I know I had a couple. The first one was really just, it's on page 34 about the, obviously the based operations. And it says enables them to work with the council as system partners. Could you just elaborate exactly what that means? I think I know what it means, but just in case.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we've struggled with it a little bit as a team. So the concept is that where we maybe have some larger scale problems, so for example, working with health colleagues or working with social care colleagues, that the voluntary sector organisations can be invited into conversations to see how they can fit into the way that we work collectively, with perhaps a louder voice or hearing their take on how we can do things better together. So I think it's very much on those lines. Does that clarify?
Yeah, I think so. So as part of the sort of, before you've made the choices of who those are, you've investigated that they actually do have good links with all of the voluntary and community sector, because that's sometimes where the gaps are.
I think what I would say,
one and it's not necessarily going out.
Yeah, I think I would say that we recognise that's probably a work in progress for the anchor organisations across the board, and we're acutely aware that some concerns have been raised by members around particularly the more rural and outer reaches of the areas, so very conscious of needing to continue to look at that and try to expand that reach of those anchor organisations, if that's reassuring to some extent.
Okay, and obviously this is a sort of general report, and then towards the end we get a bit of information about Selby. Don't expect an answer now, but just could you let us know how much funding has been spent in Selby and Ainsty, and how many, if you like, separate autonomous organisations have been involved?
Yeah, I can certainly sort that out. That's presumably particularly in regard to the Inspire grants, I'm guessing, but if we can do anything more broadly as well.
Yeah,
because I'm conscious
just
certainly
where's the money gone? Because there have been questions in the past at this committee of people not being quite certain where it was going, not being quite certain about how to access it. I think we did get some clarity on that, but it'd be nice to see the results of that. So if you could bear that in mind for the future.
My sense is, because some of it's quite complex, it might take a little bit of time to pull things together across the full picture, but I think it's information that will be relevant right across all the area constituency committees. So I shall push upwards, but have a focus obviously on Selby and Ainsty. Yeah,
if you could. And then, you know, in future reports, if you just include that.
Yeah.
You won't have to listen to me ask the question. Councillor McCartney.
Thanks, Mel. Yeah, it's just, we all recently received an email listing out the community, all the people in the community, whatever they're called, and there's about 25, 26 people there, and included parish liaison officers. Sure, many of these posts aren't filled yet, but I know they were filled. Now, I've been a chair of parish council for 12 years, and we've never been contacted by anybody, and I just wondered what they did. And on that sort of wider thing, could we actually find out what this maybe 1.5 million or £2 million worth of salaries actually do? I'm not being facetious, but they're meant to be liaison with us, and I've been never contacted. I don't know if anybody else has had any contact with them, apart from you, Tom. I noticed there are other people down who are meant to be in the Selby area, and it would be useful to find out what all these people do that should be liaising with communities, and parish, community is more important than parish councils, but in parish councils.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a lot of money, and we should be making sure we get value for money.
I think some of that probably needs to go back probably to Rachel Joyce in terms of the whole team, because it relates to the restructure where there possibly been roles in the previous district councils that now the overall council is picking up. So I can certainly ask for more clarification, but it is about that locality as a whole becoming a bigger team. So where we were very small, stronger communities, there's now those additional responsibilities. And I think some of it is around double devolution opportunities, that type of thing. But I'm not sure what the best way forward would be. It might be that an additional report comes on a bit more detail, or we can certainly supply that to members, I'm sure, much more quickly.
I think it would be, be quite useful. I mean, we hardly ever get in parish councils, hardly get any correspondence from Selby Council or from North Yorkshire. From North Yorkshire, it tends to be an email to the clerk saying, we're doing a consultation again. And that's about it. But the liaison, I mean, Les did promise parish councils were going to be at the future and all this. And they've set up this group, but quite clearly they're not liaison with or asking parishes about anything. So, and 2 million is a lot of money upon staff that were meant to be liaison with us.
Yeah.
People happy that we pursue that just to try and find out a bit more about those roles and what they're doing. I mean, certainly I sit on the town council. We haven't had any contact at all for a long time. And it's part of, I think, why I asked the question about relying on one organisation in an area. You're kind of funneling down and losing a lot of real possible opportunities. So I think that added on to me would be very useful.
Yeah, I think I'd just say it's very new, the new structure. So I think there's gaps in it, and it's still probably trying to work out exactly how it rolls out. But yeah, absolutely, pick that up.
So if you could give us that information, that'd be great, Tom. Thank you.
It may be coming. I don't know. I'm not in that particular bit of the structure. But,
one step at a time, John. Any other questions? Councillor Boskett.
Thank you, Chair. It was interesting to note the Inspire grants and the difference actually geographically. Scarborough have really obviously got their stuff together. I know it's a bigger area, likely to have a lot more groups that would benefit. But I just think maybe there's something we could do to get that Inspire grant out there to more, because there's so many that can benefit. And you know, Tom, that I'll always speak up for that grant, but I just don't know how. I mean, poor old Craven really haven't had anything, have they? But I think there could be more done into just getting communities to understand that grant's there.
Yeah.
Bit of marketing, Tom. There we go. Okay, is that all the questions? Right, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Tom.
Thank you.
I told him this morning he was your support act. So now we have agenda item 7, but he wasn't funny. I told him he had to be funny. Agenda item 9, let's talk food. We've got someone most of us have known for a long time, Angela Crossland here, to again assume we've read it, Ange, and take it from there.
Oh, there we go.
That's it.
Okay, right, thank you. Would you like me to share the presentation on the screen? Are you happy that you've seen it? Great, okay. On the screen, I'll just leave from there as well.
If it helps you, but
I can see it here. It's just
okay.
Whether you needed it. Also on screen, you'll see Ruth Everson, who's a public health manager within my team, who's done a lot of the work on the food strategy development. And she's here to answer questions as well and support questions. So just to run through for you, this is the Let's Talk Food engagement that went out over February to April recently. And I'm aware that all the Let's Talk reports come to yourselves before they're then published. So this is about giving you that overview of the work that we've been developing. So the beginning of the slides are just identifying the Let's Talk campaign. Generally, there's been about 18,500 people responding to various topics. And the topic that we've been dealing with is looking at food from the whole system approach. And we've got a variety of things going on to try and engage people and understand their feelings around food. across the system. And the Let's Talk was as you know, is kind of a wider resident survey to just think about some of those high level things around healthy food behaviours and how people are also using or wasting food. So I think the key things that you'll be quite interested in really from a Selby perspective is there was 2,053 respondents in total and 142 of those from the Selby Ainsty area. You'll have noticed from the presentation that actually all areas were generally representative of what we expected from the sample, but Selby was a lot lower. So the Selby Ainsty is about 17% of the population, and we only got an 11% response rate, where others we tended to get the average we were expecting. And this wasn't just related to the food survey. This is an ongoing limited response from this area to the Let's Talk approach. So one of the things that we've I guess comms team are going to have to think about that a little further, but one of the things we were trying to do was promote more targeted marketing towards Selby, towards the demographics we want as well, maybe younger people, etc. But yeah, it was a bit trickier to get Selby responses. And those of you that know me, I'm from Selby as well. So one of the things I want to do is get more Selby voice. So we need to think about that. Personally, for my own work in public health, I will think about how we can do that in future work. But there's certainly something from comms that we need to think about there. But again, to caveat that this is a kind of wider resident engagement. And one of the things we want to do underneath this is to have targeted engagement, particularly with other people affected by the food system. So that's farmers, businesses, manufacturers, and also those with lived experience of difficulty around food, and young people particularly, because they were significantly underrepresented as well. So we are going to youth councils, we're going to farmers, young farmers as well, got some connections into some of the wider, larger producers and things. So we're trying to get in and have the conversation across some targeted groups as well to strengthen what we understand in the local area. So I think just to pick out some of the key things, people generally understand a healthy diet and feel that they have a healthy diet. I've been asked in other ACCs around how do we define healthy food, and the survey does have a definition and helps guide people towards things like beans, pulses, lean meat, fruit, veg, etc. How people then determine that is obviously up to them. Some of the key things that people were saying is we might know what healthy food is and we try to eat it, but there are some issues around potentially accessing that and then what to do with it. So that's something we were picking up. And even with the positive responses, people were quite insightful really around understanding that for some people that is difficult. So even people saying, I feel lucky, actually, I know how to do things with healthy food, I have healthy food, but I know it's difficult for others. So they're quite insightful in that respect. Accessing healthy food was generally something people thought that they could do, but that some of the difficulties in access were about poor choice. So if it's convenience food is quite difficult. It's high in fat, sugar, salt often. It's people living in rural areas were saying if I only tried to shop in my local area, I could probably only get eggs. How can I actually access, particularly public transport, was a response for older people, that unless you had a car, for example, it got increasingly harder for you. Younger people, not so much an issue, but certainly for older people, it was on their mind about transport. So some of the key issues for access being lowering the cost of food, reducing unhealthy food advertising. So people are really keen actually to understand how can we change policy and practice around things like food. Particularly for the council, we've got a big role in that. And another one that was coming through quite positively was supporting local gardens or food projects. There was protecting farming land for food production. So people are really keyed into these kind of policy issues that we as a council are affecting. I think we've got a real opportunity at the moment, as well as we align the new local plan, how we're thinking about our policies across our system, is a real opportunity to kind of think about what people want. The food waste was interesting. Although we had quite small numbers of young people, this is where their responses differed significantly to the rest of the respondent population. So they were generally in line around healthy food and access. But in terms of food waste, they were much more likely to say they wasted food. And I think that was we're surmising, but is that related to convenience lifestyles, you know, time pressures, maybe not knowing what to do with it, those kind of things. So we really want to test that with younger people to think, why was that so distinctively different? So we were picking out around things that food goes off quickly. It's sold in larger amounts than people need because of the packaging. So, you know, loose food is actually quite an economical thing, but people can't actually get to smaller portions, so therefore they're wasting food. So key issues like that. And some of it was in line with what we understand nationally around food, people wasting food. And it's fascinating doing this work because I found out that Allerton also check twice a year into the food waste, look into the bin bags that end up at Allerton and see how much proportion is food waste, which is around about 15-16%, give or take. So it really was tying in quite interestingly with other sources of evidence that we understand. And again, skills and experience being something that people are quite interested in, really, about reducing their food waste. So that's a really quick surmise of everything. We've given some free text ideas of what people were saying within the slides. I'm pretty much saying what some of those slides identify. What I tried to give you a flavour at the bottom as well is what's already happening. So there's quite a lot, as Tom will have picked up in his report, around food insecurity partnerships, so how we're supporting people and how they're looking at developing food access models. So it's not just about giving people food, it's also about helping them understand what is impacting on their ability to access food. And we're working with the Rethink project in Selby. They're working with the cluster schools to Selby High around how to regeneratively grow food, but also how to look at behaviour change around healthy food options. And that's something Rethink are also working in Craven now on food pantries as well. So we're trying to instill in curriculum really how we can get that from an early generation. You'll be aware of the Rotters, the Love Food Hate Waste campaign. So there's lots that is kind of embedded that we can continue to promote. And some of the things that I think was really important, because this is a national agenda at the moment, is how we're engaging and giving a North Yorkshire position and a national voice, really, how we get that in the national voice. So we're working with the University of York to help us develop work around this through their Fix Our Food programme, which is a government funded programme to look at regenerative food systems and young people and children and young people in schools. And we're also engaging quite well at the moment with Bite Back, which is a national youth advocacy. So that's young people really giving their voice to key issues around food. So the next steps for us is to finalise some of this work. We're just about to go out, as I said, on the engagement groups to target some more voice around those conversations. We want to understand what those actions look like from farm to fork. So how are we supporting a regenerative system from farm through our economy, supporting food security? As you know, from a climate perspective, we have a threat to our ability to produce food in the next few decades. There is an opportunity to actually go and visit a regenerative farm trial that's happening just outside Tadcaster. If anybody is interested, please let me know, and I can organise that with the Fix Our Food team. In general, in terms of the Let's Talk campaign, the next steps from this will be to publish the report by the end of June, by the looks of how it's going. And then the next campaign in July is one with our waste team. So it ties quite nicely. I hope that's a quick synopsis for you, and any questions, please do ask.
Thanks very much, Ange. Councillor Warnigan.
Thank you, Angela. I'm not going to bore the members with everything we discussed at Harrogate ACC, but it was a really good debate there, and I think you did a bigger presentation in a sense there, which I thought was really useful. One thing I'm going to raise is, because I'm in a different ACC now, and we run the risk of getting hung, drawn and quarters for doing this. Didn't get at Harrogate, it was quite interesting, is that we should lead by example. And we have swimming baths and health centres that sell junk food. And I think we need to address that issue. But I'm also very, very aware that people do not like to be told what to eat. I have a lifetime, much of my 40 years of my working life have been growing and providing food. So I've had a lifetime of people saying to me, you know, don't tell me what I should eat. I've allowed them to make their own decision. And I have to say, on the majority of the time, when people have information before them, that given time to, excuse the pun, digest it, they will make a decision. And I think these members here should make a decision, because whenever I go into the room where we've had our lunch provided, the irony is the healthy food is left and the healthy food is thrown away. And I think we need to try and do our best to be healthy members, so we give the community a lead. And I would like to see a change there. Maybe our vice chair, who's there coming to every meeting, would actually take that on board. He could something he could champion. We do have a food champion, don't we? Do we have a food? No.
We don't have a specific food champion, no, but Councillor Haslam has been involved in a lot of the work as climate champion and has.
Yeah, okay.
Interest.
There's a direct correlation between food and climate, of course, yeah. So that I have a sort of a pet hate with all of this, and I do want to see change, and I do see that nobody's turned around to put me on the gallows. So hopefully it will be received in the way it's intended, that we lead by example. But I also am very concerned about the social aspects of this, because in a just transition, everybody should have the opportunity to eat healthily. And I feel that junk food is cheap food, and people are deciding whether to heat their house or feed their children will go for cheap food. And we've got to find a way of doing something about that, because it's cost effective to do it, because 10% of the government's budget on health and National Health Service goes on diabetes and the related diseases, which can be combated through diet rather than medication. So I think we have a bigger picture that develops when we start making change at our level. So I support everything you're doing, Angela. And as I said at the last meeting, I'd love to have some dialogue with you, but we can't at the moment because you're busy and I'm busy, sort of thing. But going forward, as your new MP in this area, I will. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that, should I? It's not this area, no. It's the Ainsty, isn't it? Going forward, I really would like to have a discussion with you as a councillor, not an MP. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Warnock. Yeah, I think there's a few points in there. One of the things we are looking at is procurement. So if you think about the size of North Yorkshire Council, and you think about the size of organisations like the ICB, the Integrated Care Board, etc., and hospitals, we have control over how we feed children in the schools. Generally, we have control over how potentially we feed people in care homes, children and older people, and our leisure centres, and the way we feed our own staff, etc. So that we have a lot of control over who we feed. So definitely procurement is a really, really tricky one, but we do want to look at that, and Fix Our Food are looking at that at a bigger system approach too. So definitely something we want to understand. There is something about people's choice. Like you say, people don't tell people what to eat. But we're also looking, as a bit of an aside, at something called commercial determinants of health. So that's how people are impacted and influenced to eat junk food, to drink alcohol, to smoke, to, you know, so how are those kind of influences impacting, which comes down again, what can we do about that is often around where can advertise, who we partner with, you know, what stance do we make as a council around some of those things. So there's quite a bit you can think about there. We will work with our behaviour change colleagues to look at how we can help with those kind of nudges in behaviour. And it can come down as well to and we know this from our own canteens and things, where the sweet stuff's positioned versus where the healthy stuff's positioned, and so some really insightful things we can do to support people to still have informed choice. Nobody wants to take away the nice stuff. You just want it proportionate, don't you? And the access around just transition again is thinking about the proliferation of junk food, particularly in areas of deprivation. They're 3 times more likely to have junk food access. Prices are usually higher as well because it's harder to get to some of those bigger chain supermarkets and stuff. So I think there's a lot of issues that why we want to connect with wider system so that we can make a bigger impact than we actually think we can.
Councillor Cartney.
One positive thing that North Yorkshire Council could do is take on board allotments, and maybe in the planning system to have, at the moment they're looking for bits of grass for kids to play on. Most villages have got lots of bits of grass because they've got so many damn houses being built. And maybe instead of having areas for kids, they could provide allotments. And I just think, there might be a positive way of at least getting some people eating a bit better. I'm sure you agree with me, Mel.
Well, I do accept that's a minor authority responsibility, one of the few responsibilities that minor authorities do have that provision. But I think there's certainly room for linkage.
It is, but it isn't. The provision of allotments might be run by the parish council, but it's only now North Yorkshire Council that can actually get the land, whether that's compulsory leasing or compulsory purchasing. So it's important. So for many villages who would like allotments, it's really difficult to get the land. And as I say, it's a major council that has the power to getting the land. So they do have a responsibility.
Yep. Councillor Duckett.
Thank you. A couple of points. First, I'm very interested what it says here about the families with an adult that's disabled are far more likely to have problems with eat food. If you could tell me a little bit about that. We were saying about, making healthy choices at school and what have you. We do have problems that you can only go so far with kids. I have great-grandchildren of my own at school that have had to go back onto packed lunch because they were coming home absolutely starving. They will not eat salads. They will not. You're talking about kids here that you try to put something in with the burgers or whatever, and it's no healthy stuff. No, don't want it. Got to be very careful how we introduce that, or else the children that we really do need to have the free school meals, whatever, just won't be getting them. They're going to have to be providing stuff from home. And I've forgotten what my third one was now. So, okay.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, Ruth is scribbling down furiously, I think. I'm just thinking about the families with disability. I think that's national figures and our figures were kind of correlating in terms of the gaps in inequality. Don't know if you want to say something on that one.
Yeah, I mean, the figures are quite stark, aren't they? I think nationally 38% of households that recognise themselves with somebody in the household have been limited a lot by disability, experience food insecurity, compares 10% of households that don't have somebody in their house limited by a disability. So it's really contrasting. So there are obviously issues there we could assume around accessibility and in terms of that kind of I guess some of the income and allowances and things as well. So yeah, we were identifying locally as well that was coming through the data. So it's something we need to explore more and understand better.
Thanks. And the healthy choice at school, we did some work, particularly with Selby High, didn't we? Just before pandemic, actually, it was while I was still in my old post, around design of school food, didn't we? And didn't take away all the nice stuff, did it? But can you give it a kind of insight as to what it did do?
Yeah, so that was a really great example of how we worked with the catering team who, early on in the conversations, we're probably thinking exactly that. How do we change the food and it be still inviting, what children want, and you know, in terms of generating the income from the food sales and things. So there was a lot of work with our trading standards team, with the catering team, to just think through how that school offer could be revised, looking at the school food standards. And there was quite a few things, yeah, like Angela says, is that we weren't taking away the unhealthy options, but the portion sizes were drastically, you know, reduced to an appropriate size calorie content, rather than the huge big tray bakes that were offered. Mixing more kind of exciting salad bars, so the pupils had the choice to go and choose what they wanted. The sandwiches and the content of the sandwiches were filled differently. And it's actually been a really great success. The social aspect of eating as well was really recognised as important, rather than grab and go. It was more of a social positioning of food, and using some of the outdoor space with canopies. So it was less rushed and less of I guess, that convenience type feel to a meal. It was much more sociable. So it was, looked at a whole range of things, and all of those changes are still in place now.
And I've remembered what my third point was. Supermarkets, you're saying about buying loose rather than packaged. But is there anything we can do campaign wise, whatever, with supermarkets? Because I was in the other day, I went to pick up some carrots, a great big, kilo bag, 50p. But I wanted to buy just enough for that meal. And it was going to work out far dearer to buy that. And it really gets my goat, and I'm sick of the sight of doing soups with the extra carrots. So, can we try to do something, whether it's using influence with government or whatever, to compel them not to be able to charge more? I mean, you're saving them having to package it up, so you should be getting it cheaper, not dearer. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor Poskett, then Councillor Grogan, then Councillor Packham.
Thank you, Chair. So first thing I wanted to just point out was the real positive impact North Yorkshire have with Feast. So we work with Feast, and obviously a big part of that is food. We have children that come to our holiday club that we educate on food, on various things, and they love it. They absolutely do love it. And there are lots of things you can do to encourage that. I think what is needed is just I say this such a lot, is a multi-agency approach. So at the moment, we currently do a after-school club, and we use food waste charities. So we use Olio, and we link in with lots of supermarkets, and we make use of what they are wasting. Now, if you say to a kid, "Here's a slice of pizza," they're going to take the slice of pizza. If you put the ingredients out that are being wasted and say, "We've got some baguettes, we've got this, we've got that," they will eat that pizza as well. So I think it's when that offer is there, the key issue with young people, and I think young people are at the heart of most of this, is convenience and speed. That's what it is. They don't want to wait for things. There's peer pressure at school to eat the same as what everybody else is eating, but certainly our teenagers and our primary kids will really engage in food. So in our community, we have community garden, we have allotments that are run by various groups. We're doing a gardening project this summer where they can see where the food is grown, and genuinely they love it. They really do. So I think it's making sure everybody is doing the same thing, because if it's one of you shouting about lettuce and 2 minutes down the road somebody's selling pizza 50p, they're going to go for the pizza. So I just compliments on the Feast programme, because it works fantastically, but also to look at those food waste places and get kids talking about food again. A lot of them wouldn't know where a chicken nugget even came from. They wouldn't make the link with a butcher and a chicken is, there you go, Iceland, yeah. So I think there's probably, whilst Feast is amazing, there's probably more we can do in terms of allotments, encouraging that positive dialogue around food and how you can engage with it. But yeah, they will eat a baguette pizza, trust me.
Okay. Councillor Grogan.
Yes, I'd just like to support my colleague John McCartney in terms of allotments. And I'm a part of the Parish Council of South Milford, and our allotments are being reduced in size because they're next door to the church, and as more graves are being used, that land's being reduced. So we've went out, reached out to a farmer and bought some land. I used from my locality grant, 4,000 quid worth, and we got an allotment set up and it was taken up immediately. In fact, there's an enormous waiting list. When I talked to my other colleagues, I've got 8 other parish councils in my area, and each one was interested in allotments. And John's quite right. There's no land, hardly any land, but North Yorkshire could do something about that, I think. What also part of South Milford is there's a group, a voluntary group that's set up called part of Incredible Edible. Have you heard of that? Or part of Leeds City Council, and that's been very, very successful. All they'll grow in their tubs is food to eat, apart from cannabis, of course. They won't grow cannabis plants, but no, they grow food, and it's been very, very good. And it's a lot of it's near the old people's bungalows, and the old people come out and eat. So I think it's something that we should be pursuing.
Councillor Packham.
Yeah, thanks. I suppose my problem with this, and I think the stuff you're doing is really useful, but my problem with this is that when it comes down to it, people that eat healthily tend to be those that can afford to eat healthily. And I think there's very little mention in here of the issues that we're facing in terms of deprivation in parts of this area. Those people are dependent on either buying the cheapest food they can find, which you've already accepted tends to be unhealthy, or they go to the food bank. And I've found out recently the massive increase in the number of people that are attending the food bank. Are you working with the food bank and with those that in that area to address healthy food for the whole population, not just for those that can afford it, is my first question. The second one goes down to waste, and that is that in terms of food waste recycling, my recollection is that this council has got a get out of jail free card on food waste and doesn't need to actually start collecting it until about 2043. So can we put some pressure on to bring that forward? And the third thing is that there are in some of our settlements there are community fridges and things like that. Those I think are really useful, and can we go and develop some more of them? Because if we want everybody to eat healthily, we've got to accept that some people can't afford to. Thank you.
Cheers.
I'll take the food waste one first, around pressure on to bring it forward. I'll take that back to colleagues as a question who are working closer within that. I don't know if Carl was talking about that one or no. Just put your hand up. And then in terms of working with food insecurity, Ruth, do you want to pick that one up, and the pantries one, the community fridge?
Yeah, no problem. So we've been working throughout the process over the last 18 months to consider what the priorities are around food in North Yorkshire. We're looking at what we currently have, what the current challenges are, and where we want to be in 10, 20 years. So we've had a lot of stakeholders involved in those conversations, and as a result, we've identified what we're calling action domains, and one is around that just food. And food insecurity. So food insecurity, we're looking at, yes, income and accessibility in terms of geography as well, and the utilisation. So that broader aspect of food security. There's a lot of research and a lot of evidence now around a movement towards food ladders. So we've talked about food banks, the food pantries, so enabling people to access food according to their income and their accessibility that's appropriate to them across that up and down that ladder. So we're hopefully trying to move people away from needing food banks only if they're in that emergency situation, and less reliance on that, and the different offers and the different models. So we've got a lot of people involved in helping us with that conversation and acknowledging what's already in place. One of the focused conversations we're going to be having is with local food projects And I think we've got about 15, 16 representatives across the North Yorkshire who are coming and having that conversation with us. So it'd be really interesting as to kind of hear from them what some of the local issues are, what some of people's values are, what some of the challenges are, and have that specific conversation with them at the front face of those particular initiatives, so we can feed back to you on those conversations.
Okay.
Just a quick follow-up, if I
Yeah.
may. I would like to see some feedback on that, please. I must admit that I am slightly disappointed that in a Let's Talk Food survey, that issue is not more prominent, because it is a major issue. It's a much more major issue than the fact that a kid prefers pizzas to lettuce, in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, got Councillor Warnock and then Councillor Arthur.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to support Councillor Grogan in supporting Councillor McCartney on the concept of allotments. And Angela knows from the last Harrogate ACC that in the pandemic, I ploughed up at the request of villagers 7 allotments on my land, and they're still using them. And in fact, other people want me to plough up more. So one thing we could do is contact farmers, because as I said to Angela, it doesn't take a lot of space. For 10 allotments, it does not take a lot of space in the bigger picture. And I don't charge anything. They paid me for water because I'm on a meter, but other than that, I don't charge anything. I don't think a farmer would charge anybody in the community to grow vegetables on their land. But we did actually, at the last full council meeting, have a motion presented to us, which actually talked about growing food on council-owned land. Prior to that, the meeting before that, we had a suggestion that we looked at that as well, and that was taken to the executive member, who I can't remember who is, for that responsibility. But we will hopefully get a report back. It might go to scrutiny or something. Just on the subject of cheap food, though, I mean, I don't think we should eat. Isn't it tragic that we are talking about food banks? And sadly, when I ran a food larder during the pandemic, people brought food for me for people to pack and distribute, and I was using food liberally there because people's idea of what the people that were struggling wanted was pot noodles in the main. But also, it's not food that sounds like it's cheap, isn't really cheap, because you get £240 a ton for a sack for a sack of potatoes. That's what it equates to per ton. But when it's, I'm not going to mention a brand, but they had a footballer support them. But when it gets into that pot packet called crisps, it's £4,600 a ton. So people are buying potatoes really, really expensively that way. So I think if people want crisps, what we should maybe do is introduce schemes where we show them how to make their own crisps out of a potato, because it's not difficult, and then they pay a lot less for them. But I think I'm irritated by all of this, because we should not be having food banks. People should not be wondering where the next pennies come to put food on the table, and we need to ultimately address the bigger issue. And I think what you're doing is great, Angela, and the council's doing something about this. But I'm with Councillor Packham on this, is that we need to look at what's affecting people deprivation-wise and why, and let's treat the cause, not the symptom, all the time. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Arthur.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's going back to the supermarkets again. I think part of the problem here is the 2-for-1 offers and things like that. I mean, they tend to be on things like biscuits and pies and junk food and stuff like that, rather than the healthy food. I'm not against 2-for-1 offers, but maybe do some of the healthy food as well, rather than junk food. And I'd also like to agree with Steph about getting stuff in the supermarkets, buying packets. For somebody like me who lives alone, it's no good. I just, like Steph, I need to buy a little bit, say a carrot or two, not a huge bag full, which will then be wasted. So I'd just like to agree with Steph on that as well.
It's an excellent green grocery, Market Cross. It'll sell you a carrot. I think sometimes it is just about looking at what's available. And I think the issue around supermarkets is, yes, it wants dealing with, but we have to be realistic about what we as North Yorkshire can do. That's something we should be lobbying about. And I know I go on and on about lobbying, but we don't do anywhere near enough of it. Councillor McCartney.
Just come back to what Arnie said about, I mean, Arnie's obviously a very nice man who allows people to have allotments. The majority of
Can we
farmers,
keep the noise down?
the majority of farmers are scrounging, get as much money as they want. And when my parish councils have approached farmers, they've been derisory, and they wanted top dollar for the land. So, which is why we have the powers to compulsory lease or compulsory purchase. And I think North Yorkshire should be doing that and offering out to councils. When we tried to get the land in Kellington, we contacted Selby District Council and they didn't want to know.
Oh.
But we managed to coerce the landowner into providing some in the end.
Okay, so everything. Councillor Jabor is indicating he wants to ask the question. I told him he could only ask a question because last time I allowed him, it wasn't about Selby, it was general. If it's not about Selby, but quickly, since somebody did refer to you. Okay, let's take that up outside the meeting, yeah. I mean, I'd like
just
to be
say
included.
it's general, it's going to all the ACCs, so
Yeah.
it's a general invite, yeah.
Yeah, so anything you wanted to come back on, Ange? Oh, sorry, Councillor Bosket.
Sorry, just last point to note. I might get shot down for suggesting this or just saying it, but one of the things that I think that helps massively with healthy eating, if you are able to afford it, are the likes of Gusto, HelloFresh, all those kind of things. It helps with food waste. It helps with, you get exactly what you need in that package. It encourages nutritionally balanced meals. I think there's definitely some work to be done with local farmers, local suppliers, allotments, all of those things that could provide a similar service. You know, I'm a single parent, 2 teenagers. That works for me. I'm very well aware that I can afford that. It's not necessarily the most cost-effective way of eating, but actually in that box, you get exactly what you need. If you need 2 carrots, you get 2 carrots. If you need a garlic, that's what you get. There's no waste. They're nutritionally balanced meals. And I would really like to see some sort of scheme that works with local farmers, local butchers, that delivers that kind. You're supporting your local, but you're promoting healthy meals, but it's, you know, my 15-year-old cooks the recipes that are in there. So just something to note.
Yeah, Kirsty, I think one of the things that we want to understand actually is we're thinking about that economy, and we're working with Richard and Julian's team actually working with us. And one of the things we want to think about is what is the innovation, particularly around social local supply chains, and you know, is there something as well around regenerative, not just about, so it's how do we kind of pull those things together. So it's definitely on my radar, how we would do it. We're getting there, but definitely something to think about.
Yeah, I think it is for me, for North Yorkshire, to pick up those linkages between the different departments and the things that we do. You know, it is annoying that we get given sandwiches that come from Bradford. You know, it's about recognising those travel miles that, you know, for many years people have ignored. They're a cost, a real cost. And the allotments linking up with planning then, you know, why can't in any large development a piece of land be set aside for potential for that? You know, it's nice if you can find the money to buy it, but we can build it in. If we're buying it afterwards, it's costing us a lot more money. And working with the Trussell Trust, because a lot of the food banks are organised with them, and the food isn't healthy that goes to them, but it's what there is. And sometimes it has to be supplied. We had this through citizens' advice. The only bags we could keep in there were things that kept, but people were sometimes in a room with no cooker. You know, they had a kettle. So, you know, it everything limits. So it is just taking the issue back as far as you possibly can. And we just have to keep plugging it with kids who don't like it. 9 times you have to introduce a piece of food and eventually they like it. And it's, you know, salads isn't lettuce. Don't give them lettuce. It's pasta salads. There's all kinds of other things. So I just think I see something as this as being that umbrella that you can actually start to pull all that together, that would be really, really useful.
That's
And
exactly the intention. Yeah.
I would say to you, Kirsty, if what you're doing through Feast, put it out somewhere, share the information, how it's working. You know, we should be sharing, those of us who can afford, I don't use the ones you mentioned, but, you know,
Yeah.
make the recipe card and publish it so
Yeah.
that people can see it.
I agree. I think we're all a bit guilty of that sort of what's going on in our little
Yeah.
communities, and what's working for us. We don't necessarily share it on a global scale, but we do. You know, there are grounds that we're breaking that are making a really big difference on that. So yes, I agree. There's work to be shared.
Yeah, there's not enough Feast work in Selby generally. So anything, I mean, I've getting the mayor's wife in to talk to us. So I think it's, you know, it's and can I add to you what I said to Tom about in terms of they are really poor returns from Selby, and I wish I could work out what it is, but I think sometimes we're not in the right places and our funnel's not working. You know, we need to be looking at other places, and I'd be happy to do, you know, a bit of work around that. You know, we could have given it out to all our allotment holders in town. You know, there are, you'd maybe get some skewed responses, but you could bear that in mind. So
We did try focus it in on where we might get more need. So we did try and get it to, particularly through our community organisations as well.
It's just a huge job, but thank you very much. Turn that off. So now we get to item 10, and thanks to Sarah, who's actually present. She was going to be via Teams, and Julian, who've been sitting there patiently just to take us through this item. That's my thing. Yeah, the right-hand button. There you go. When the light comes on, you're okay.
Right, good afternoon then. You should have a report regarding the area constituency committee budgets, which have been previously discussed at the 2 previous meetings and in an informal meeting. So I'm here today to talk to you about the discussions that took place within the working group that you appointed to look at this issue separately. So just in terms of background, the area committee was allocated £50,000 per year, and that was the purpose of that was to help deliver the council plan, the economic growth strategy, the destination management plan, or any other local plans or strategies of significance. And there's a number of ways that budget could be utilised. The recommendations being to develop local important projects, so to support things like feasibility work, market research and so on, or to contribute or add value to existing regeneration or tourism activities. So those are kind of the suggested purposes of that budget. Initial discussions took place in an informal meeting, which most of you attended on the 8th of February. And a number of project ideas were submitted and were subsequently collated by officers. And then on the 26th of April, you appointed the working group to look at this in more detail. And since then, the working group met on the 24th of May to discuss those proposals and to suggest a recommended shortlist. So we're here today to ask you whether you would like to support that recommended shortlist, and endorse the completion of project scoping forms for each of the projects that were recommended, and also to consider whether you would support the rejection of one of the projects that the working party would like to
recommend is rejected, and if none of the projects are supported or if there's still a shortfall in an unallocated budget, to bring forward any other ideas. So that's the purpose of this report. So it's not to actually look at the projects in detail. That's what the work that you delegated to the working party, but further to look at their recommendations and decide whether or not to recommend them for further work. So you should have a presentation that the working party looked over, and that goes into detail a little on the process from this point. So the process now would be that should you decide to support the shortlist, it would then be, each project would then have a project scoping form completed by ourselves as officers, the Regen team, and this is then reviewed by the assistant director, the legal contracts team, finance, the climate change team, and equalities. The projects are then reviewed by the portfolio holder, Councillor Crane, for approval, and then would come back to you at the September meeting for final review and recommendation, and then final sign off by Nick Hahn and James Horden. The funds then would need to be spent by the end of March 2025. So we are against a tight time frame, and that does necessitate that the projects that we decide to support would need to be able to be worked up in a short time frame, and the funds to be spent by the end of March 2025. And I believe that as a committee, you weren't really in favour of supporting feasibility work for larger projects, but rather smaller projects that you could have a greater impact upon. So that's the type of thing that the working group took into account when we looked at the projects in more detail. So at the working group, the projects that were recommended for approval were a project which we're calling Interactive Towns, which is a mainly online project to provide visitors to the towns with information about points of interest such as car parks, walking trails, cultural attractions, green spaces, amenities, and so on. This is a project that has already been funded in Sherburn separately through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and so the working group felt that they would like to consider extending it to Selby and Tadcaster, and that the cost of that element of the recommendations would be £20,000. Should you decide to support this project, then, as I say, the regeneration team will work up a full project proposal which would come to the September meeting, and I believe that you've also got a paper that was tabled today that goes into a little more detail in that project. But as I say, we're not asking you to look at the detail of the projects, but rather to ratify the recommendations of the working party. Secondly, the working party would also like to recommend that the project known as real-time bus information is also taken forward. That would involve, again, it's a project that has some funding already for Sherburn, but again, we're talking about extending it so that we could have additional money spent in Sherburn as well as Tadcaster and Selby, and it involves the purchase of digital displays that are attached to bus stops that allow people to see when the next bus
is due to arrive. So it's kind of supplementary to timetables, which may not be accurate, and allows people, even if they don't have access to a phone or their battery's dead or whatever, to be able to see when there's a bus arriving. And then the third project that the Working Party would like you to take forward is the provision of village cinema facilities for 2 villages which are yet to be decided, but we would look at some kind of decision-making criteria that would allow us to see that the villages involved have put forward a good case for why they should be selected, and to assure us that they have plans in place to make sure that that they can run this service effectively. The working group also looked at a proposal for the extension of town centre Wi-Fi in Selby and Sherburn to cover a larger geographical area, but they felt that that was not sufficiently good value for money, and are recommending that you do not support that project. So, as I said, there is partial funding in place from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund for some of these proposals, but we believe that at this stage they would total around £100,000, although the scoping still needs to be done, which would involve the full allocation of your budget for the current and previous year. That being 20,000 for interactive towns, 60,000 for real-time bus information, and £20,000 for the village cinemas. So I would just like to say that these are the projects that we would ask you to recommend, but there is the option for you to discuss this and you know, to bring forward anything else that hasn't been discussed. However, I would stress that you did delegate that role to the Working Party. Is there any comments on those projects at this stage?
Councillor Pascoe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, do any of the projects mentioned have a non-ongoing cost after the funds have been allocated? Because the funds, I presume, have to be spent before the end of 2025. Yeah. Who's going to pick up the cost?
That was one of the criteria that was considered by the Working Party, is the avoidance of ongoing costs, and that would certainly be something that that the other stages in this process would look at. There are some costs involved in the real-time bus information, but we would look at capitalising those costs for a 10-year period. And for the village cinemas, we would expect the host organisation to charge a nominal ticket price in order to cover the ongoing costs.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Oh, sorry, Andy again.
Looking forward, Ainsty might not be part of this ACC after the election. I don't know if I can mention the election, but I've done it now.
You can mention the election, not any particular party.
Yeah, I'm not promoting anything. I was just wondering, was anything considered for Ainsty? Because Ainsty gets left out of everything at this ACC.
I think in terms of the group, we did look at that, and it would be a matter of a consideration whether one of the villages that could bid would be in the Ainsty. But you know, there had been some initial discussion. The first discussion we had, there did seem to be a general acceptance that because it was difficult to distribute this amount of money, and that it would be based, if you like, around the 3 centres of Selby, Tad and Sherburn. But one of the reasons I think why those of us on that working group sort of included the cinema one was it did give that opportunity to put some money sort of out there, you know, in the wider community.
Can I come back, Chair?
Yeah.
Just on the cinema, could that be considered as a mobile system or unit?
I think the difficulty with that is the ongoing upkeep of that, around dragging it around. It will get damaged. Whose responsibility is it? Whereas it was actually Councillor McCartney who brought this forward, because they do it in Eggborough and it's worked well there, and there was a known cost for supplying it, and then a local group would take on the responsibility and the upkeep and everything else. I think anything other than that, and it was to try to move even a projector around, you know, it ain't easy. Councillor Backham.
Yeah, just to help on that, having had both a mobile system and a fixed system, I can confirm that the mobile system is an utter nightmare.
Easy. We had direct evidence from a user, so.
Again, that was discussed by the working group as well, who decided that this was the better option. Yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Poskett.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to say, it wasn't the easiest of discussions, and I think there were lots of things that it was quite a good debate on what we supported, what we didn't. It was difficult to come across with things that support Selby District as a whole. I would not say that's the most perfect list that we could come up with, but I think given the time that we've got, I think it's a fairly good list. So I would propose that if members are happy to vote, that we move ahead with those 3 suggestions.
So my only caveat would be that I do find the cost of the bus thing quite prohibitive, Kim Tez, and this paper isn't tabled today. It was tabled at the meeting and was discussed at the meeting, and that's why I put it out, because I had assumed it would be incorporated in the report. But I see that as more than, if you like, a map. What we discussed was that it would need a map as well, because there are lots of people who aren't au fait with IT and maybe never will be, but that population would be growing, whereas those all need something printed, and printed stuff goes out of date much quicker. There are ongoing costs towards keeping a good website and QR codes and things going, and who knows, QR codes might be as irrelevant as Betamax in a few years. You never know what's coming around the corner, but it was an opportunity. And that's why I put it there, because I see it as being very broad. And I think in Tad and Sherburn and Selby, we have a lot of good local historians and expertise. And I was anxious that we involve them and don't bring in some outside consultants, so we have to sit and tell them what there is. I mean, there will be costs associated maybe with subcontracting some of the work to them, if that's possible. But I don't see any reason why we can't do that and actually really broaden it out in this. And I've only covered bits of it. And it was that thing about teenagers, or was saying there's nothing to do in Selby, and using that as your central sort of core. So I'm happy to put Kirsty's suggestion to the meeting. I think it would be nice if we had some more innovative stuff, but that largely is down to us. We didn't come up with it, and now we're on a treadmill. But I would log. I think the bus stuff is too expensive, and we've got 30 bus stops in Selby town alone. We've got about 3 shelters, so it's where it would fit. Councillor Catanack.
Seeing that you've mentioned it and seeing that bus is my specialist subject on Mastermind, whilst I would love to get better information, I think it would be too costly, and I don't see that we would get any great benefit from it. So I would not be voting for that. However, I'm happy to give more information with regard to your email that you put out, seeing that my name is on it.
Sorry, it's in a positive way.
Oh, no, I'm appreciative. It's just that I got additional people, and dare I say, I'm surprised Roland Chilvers is not mentioned. And can I say there are fantastic websites that are already out there. I'm thinking Selby Past and Present, the Selby Railways one. It's magnificent what's out there. And if we can bring them all together, my only question would be, which David Jones is it? You know.
I'd have to read it again, but I know. Yes, no, it wasn't. It's not David Jones from Wistow.
Cawood.
Kaywood. Actually Jennifer and Steve gave me that name. I think he used to be a head at the high school. So anyway.
I didn't think it was. Otherwise, of the 5 mentioned there, 3 are from Kaywood. So.
Yeah. But it's important to use that local expertise. And what I would see this as an umbrella. We don't want to reprint all that information that's already out there. We just want to provide those links. I love umbrellas, you know, that linking together of what's already there, thinking it like that. Because then those people are responsible for keeping that up to date. We haven't got to pay to keep ours up to date. So
if I can just mention, because I've actually saw Roland not that long ago, and I gave him my uncle's photographic collection, and a lot of that his collection featured in the history of Selby District Council. And he's started on more projects, and he's going into partnership with Naburn and Stillingfleet, and he's already printed a lot of books in conjunction with the Abbot Staith.
I've got 3 or 4 of them. It's by no means exclusive. It was really just a bit of a brain dump to stimulate other stuff, which clearly, it would do. It's all Richard Moody's archive. I've no idea where that sits now. We all know this stuff is out there and it's fabulous and we need to share it. So that's really what it's for. So we have a proposal. Oh, sorry, Councillor Packham.
Just wanted to clarify on the bus time, on the bus signs. We've got those. We're having those in Sherburn anyway, aren't we?
Yeah.
As part
So
of the
the
scheme.
funding is already approved for 2 units in Sherburn and 1 unit in Tadcaster,
Yeah.
and they cost £10,000 each. So it'd be for a further 6.
Yeah. I think they are important in Sherburn. I can't comment for anywhere else, but I think they are important for Sherburn because we've got essentially 2 main bus stops in the middle of the village. If you're very lucky, if you can find a timetable that will tell you when a bus is coming, and in any event, it might not turn up. So having an interactive sign would be extremely useful.
And that figure does include the running costs for 10 years. So it's not just the initial purchase.
It's just where, that's all. I mean, ideally we'd like one probably on Flaxley Road and one on Abbots Road, but where, and I don't know, the buses are, I'd like some buses and then tell people when they come in to go back to where we often end up here. So we have a proposal that those 3 go forward. As I say, maybe with some fluidity around the budgets, but yeah, is that okay? Is that all agreed? Anyone against? Sorry, Councillor Poskett.
Oh yeah, Andrews. So can I just check, just clarify, are we voting on all 3 as a package or are we separating them?
No, I think, they're what we came up with and that covers the total. I think we need some fluidity in terms of the expenditure. Councillor Grogan, yes, I've noted, again, didn't even realise Councillor Lee was in attendance. I'll pick it up. Do you want to speak or shall I go to Councillor Lee? Okay. Okay, Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chairman. I seem to recall in the past when we were discussing potential projects, did we not talk about sort of a signpost to heritage assets across the area? That was mentioned, I think, a couple of meetings ago. Was that not considered? My only concern with these proposals is that the money seems to is going to be spent really just benefiting a very small area. And was there nothing along the lines of the signposts that was considered?
Well, nothing along physical signposting, but obviously the website that would have the information would clearly be a digital signpost towards them and there would be information about them.
Can I just come back on that?
Yeah.
So the Interactive Towns project, the funding that's already allocated for Sherburn from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund would include a physical town map, and that was incorporated into the discussion that we had with the working party for the interactive town maps for, the interactive towns projects for Selby and Tadcaster. And so it could be incorporated into the projects in addition to the digital element of it. That's something that I believe should be drawn out at the project scoping stage, because we're here to really look at the principles of the projects rather than the detail. And I would suggest that we have a discussion with tourism as well about how this project might fit into any plans that they've got. But I don't think we should necessarily rule that out, a physical presence from that project at this stage.
Yeah, thanks. If I could just come back quickly, Madam Chairman. I mean, I think I agree with you on the bus project, the signs. I think that is too expensive. I think you've admitted that yourself. So if the consensus is that it is too expensive, we should probably just rule that out now and proceed with the others, which we think has got more mileage.
That would leave you with £60,000 unallocated that needs to be spent by the end of March.
I would prefer to expand if the community cinema project is, something that we think is of benefit. At the moment on the paper, it specifies 2 villages. I'm sure there are probably others that would take up the offer, so we could probably redirect the funds into enhancing that project if the members of the subcommittee feel that that is something that is going to be of benefit.
On that note, the reason we selected 2 is because Selby, Tadcaster and Sherburn already have existing cinema facilities, so it would be to enhance those.
Selby doesn't.
Selby has the town hall, which I think the council provides films.
There's no film in Selby. I can absolutely assure you.
I'm just reflecting what was discussed at the working party.
Yeah, but that's not the suggestion going forward. This was very much about putting it in the rural areas. Councillor Poskett, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think part of that discussion revolved around what community groups were available and would be willing to run that kind of project. That was a big part of that discussion. And I think I'm fair in saying that, the bus information points was a controversial subject. It wasn't something it's not the sexiest of proposals, and it's not something that everybody really necessarily agreed with. I would be in favour of putting more money into the information and heritage part in that. I would support that hugely, but it's 60,000 to move into those 2 is a large.
Councillor Paraskos and then Councillor Grogan. We'll take all the discussion, and then if somebody wants to formally move things, but we could take the 3 things separately. But there are, I think there was support for having some of that bus information. If it's going into Sherburn and it's going into Tad, it would be good to have some in Selby as well. So I'm not saying completely, knock it off, but that is quite a lot of money, and where those would be somewhat difficult. But we'll see. Councillor Grogan.
Yeah, I want to thank the working party for what they've done. I'm not part of that working party, and it's not fair for me to criticise. But what I've heard today, you yourself, Chair, against the bus scheme.
I'm not against it. Just the amount.
I apologise. Then I'm very much against it from what I've heard today. I would like that quashed. I think the money should go into the heritage. I've heard what Kirsty said about not being agreement about the buses. I've heard what Councillor Paraskos and Councillor Leave said. I want that taken out, to be fair. I want to push for the heritage scheme. I suggested that many months ago. I'd like to see the money spent in that direction.
Okay. Anybody else just want to have a general comment? Sorry, Julian.
Not at all. Really a plea from officers here that we need clarity from you today, because other area constituency committees have taken the review and progressing with their projects, and the timescales for spending this are
are very tight, even on the basis of getting clarity from you today. So it's for you to tell us what your priority is. The decision is, in this case, with officers, with the director in consultation with finance. We will seek to reflect your views clearly, but we really do need that clarity today, guys, please.
Yeah. Councillor Blascos, you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just propose that we take each case on individually and have a vote on it and see what the members think?
Yeah, that's
all right.
that's where I was at really in terms, because I just think that's easier. Councillor Grogan.
Sorry, Chair. Just to clarify what we're talking about, the heritage scheme, because you talked about the heritage scheme was to do with the towns. That's correct, isn't it? Selby, Sherburn and Tadcaster, is that what we're saying? I'd like that to include Towton, because it's an important site. I'd like to include Councillor Catanax, Kaywood, because that's obviously quite an important area. So you're just going to focus on the town.
If you read what I put down, it is in there. That was the whole point. It's information. We can point to all the history that's around. So it's not just in the towns. Yeah, sure. Well, I will keep pushing what I put down. Councillor Foskett.
Just last comment, I just wanted to add the bus information signs was brought up because Sherburn and Tadcaster are getting this was something that was heavily requested by residents, especially in Tadcaster. I know that Bob's residents feel similar. So the natural, as we had a discussion about the 3 market towns, 3 service towns, one of the natural progressions with that is to offer that to Selby. And so that's where that came from. I don't think it's necessarily that we all said £60,000, let's spend it on that. But as the 2 other market towns are getting that and residents felt that would be beneficial, then it seemed natural to suggest it for Selby.
Councillor Packham.
Can I say that I think it's bizarre that we're not thinking of putting the bus note things in Selby, because I think it's a large town. It's got a lot of buses flowing. It's got outlying residential areas. So can I propose an amendment to the recommendation, which is that we put 4 of those signs in Selby, that we don't bother with them in Tadcaster and Sherburn because we've already got them covered in another way, and that we then transfer the 20,000 from that to the heritage study. And that we enlarge the heritage study to include the whole area. Thank you.
Anybody second? That's seconded. Okay.
Yeah.
Having said we'll take them individually, we'll still do that, but with that amendment, that would then be 40,000. Yeah. That's okay with you, Gillian and Sarah. Yeah. In terms of what we'll have to do. Okay.
Yeah, that would be possible. I mean, it was, like I say, 10,000 per unit. We picked 6 as a working party as a notional figure, but that can be adjusted. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
So just check, is everyone clear now what we are voting on? So interactive towns 20k as printed, real-time bus information amended just for 4th Selby for 40k, village centres as printed 20k, and another 20k for the
that goes in there.
Yeah.
So that the interactive towns and heritage goes to 40.
40, okay.
And that was my understanding. Yes, that's what Bob just proposed.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Take well as a block on that basis if everyone's happy.
Well, we've had some objections. Somebody, Councillor Grogan said he didn't want to support it. So let's take them individually, shall we? Okay, so the first one, which is the interactive towns and heritage, extended to the smaller villages where there are significant issues around culture, art, history or whatever, and that would be 40,000. All those in favour? Anyone against? And no abstentions? Okay, that's carried. So the second one then is the real-time bus information, reduced to 40,000, probably being spent in Selby Town. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Sorry, against? 2. Okay, that's also carried.
Abstentions?
Abstentions? 2. Okay. And then the third one, which is the village cinemas, which is likely to be picked up by 2 villages. But we will ask for a full sort of kind of worked out business plan about how that'll work and how it'll be sustainable, and surrounding areas that would then come into any village hall. Yeah, all in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay, there you go, Julian. Sarah, a decision. Can't say as it, it's as clear as mud, I'm sure, but there we go. We've got there. Thank you very much, everyone. It's amazing. We get very little discussion, but when you actually bring something, it stimulated all that. So that was well worth it. Okay.
Melanie,
Lost contact
the,
again. Let me just get.
You think about fair things. It says RSPC. Do you mean RSPB?
Sorry?
RSPB.
What have I done?
Paragraph 9. It says RSPC. I've never heard that organisation. It's RSPB.
I typed it very quickly late at night. Come on. We're all free to put in stuff when we want to. Okay, could be a niche interest. So then we get to item 11, which is the free SEND school, which, like me, you're probably all fed up of talking about, but we seem to have agreed a colour. So we've got over the last hurdle. You've got an update there. Any questions, anything you want to feed back to officers other than get a spade out and let's start yesterday? Yes, definitely. And we're happy to note that and say, we look forward to a proper timetable. I think, our meetings are few and far between. I think we need a proper Gantt chart or timetable or something. So I think if we ask, we might get. Thank you. The update on the bus services. Councillor Catternack, and I know Councillor Proud wanted to come in as well. Councillor Catternack.
It was just after I got home from the momentous planning meeting yesterday. What's this in front of me? God. I was on Facebook and I seemed to see something, and the problem was I didn't write it down, but it seemed to be updated information with regard to the 3.5. Right. So in that case, are you going to tell me what it was? Because I didn't really read through it, but I got the impression that it detailed enhanced services, one of which is on my favourite bus route.
If I bring in Jack did certainly distribute it on some platforms, but it's a bit foggy, isn't it, Jack? You get through it.
Yeah, so we got an email yesterday updating vaguely that there was some buses going to be cut, some services that were going to other places. So Stainerall's losing their bus. It was being paid for by the 106 money that's run out. It was just to say we've got more money, we've lost out, I think, which is disappointing. But it's not part of this agenda app, so I just thought I'd flag it up because we all should have got the email yesterday. But it wasn't very clear as to where we stand really until I think the 21st of July when it comes into play. But until we get an actual timetable through, we don't really know what's happening.
No, so again, do we want to just feedback? We would like some more detailed information. Yeah, but if we do it from the committee, it's got a bit more, a bit more weight, and then we'll all get the information, Jack, if that's okay. Councillor Catternack.
This is where I've got to be careful, because if this came out now, would it be allowed to be circulated because we have this thing on July the 4th? General election.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, sorry, it was the way you were looking back at me. It's like, what he's talking about.
But I know people like to spread what you can and can't do during. I can't remember what the proper word is now for purdah. It's been purdah for years, but I just think it is not. That's not a party political issue as such, is it? It's about local services. What we're about.
If I can help, I can try and ascertain the information. It might take a little time till the 5th of July, and then I'll be able to circulate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. There you go. But I think we need need to be asking for it now rather than waiting for another meeting. Otherwise, it just yeah. Okay, is that okay if Paul tries to follow that up and we can get that information sent out? Continues to be an issue for us, I think. Okay, so item 13. This was about our. I think certainly it was a few months ago, cross-party agreement that we were very keen to keep a Selby area constituency committee, as there are definite rumours that we're going to go into a central one with Harrogate, and there was agreement that we wanted to try and keep that. Selby's has its own issues. I must admit, I went to speak to a new head recently of a local school, and she says she's never quite come across an area like Selby, because she's come from Leeds, as it has urban problems, but it's a largely rural area. And I think more and more that's what I'm hearing. And that's why for us to be lumped in with someone else, which is very different. So we've asked just what was happening, has it got any information? And we've got what's, do you want to read it out?
So I've got a response back from Daniel Harry, our Head of Democratic Services, just to inform you that there are still discussions underway on what the preferred options could be, and that a range of options are being considered by the executive and senior officers. So it's a holding response. Obviously, we'll follow that up and keep chasing that for a more detailed response. Thank you, Chair.
But I think as individual members, if you do want to retain something locally, we need to be pushing for it all the time through any channels that we have. It's all a bit up in the air anyway, because of whether it be an easing wold and all kinds of other things and lots of cross-boundary issues. But Selby does need to maintain that local committee. Okay, so then we move to the work programme, which Paul has very kindly looked at us, and there seem to be lots of gaps.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, one of the things I want to raise with you and the committee is that at this time of the year, we tend to have a work programme in session with the whole committee. Obviously, the calling of general elections probably put that back a little bit. So we're looking probably to do that in early July, as soon as possible after the election, and do a Teams meeting for everybody to develop that. If you call Council 1 can wish for an item on water quality in the constituency area. So I got in touch with a contact officer who unfortunately couldn't make today's meeting, and I think it's away at a conference now in this September one, so it may actually have to be allocated in January or onwards, but we'll keep pressing and just seeing if he's got any availability before then. There are a number of things on your potential to-do list. Obviously, there will be changes in political representation and MPs. You may wish to consider whether to invite the MP to each of your meetings, to different meetings. And there may be things on this list with the bullet points you may want to look at further or to take off, so a chance to adjust your work programme accordingly. Some colleagues are asking for annual reports to be brought to the various ACCs as they go along, and some of which have accepted like stronger communities. So again, we need to build that in, work with officers, which is the right timescale to bring it back for you, providing that's what you want as well as a committee. So yes, it's pretty bland and a very quiet meeting at the moment for September, but I'm sure it will grow in the next few weeks once we have the chance to reflect. If members have any particular issues want on this ACC, please do contact me and we'll put that together for this work programme in session. So we'll let you know date and time in due course. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so that's Councillor Warnican.
Thank you. I just wanted to suggest we remove from page 88 reference to the report from the Police and Fire and Crime Commissioner. Obviously, they don't exist anymore, but it made me think maybe we could invite our new mayor, see if they were willing to come to talk to us about their role.
Or the deputy will carry that responsibility. Yeah.
No, but either of them or both.
Yes, I think that it's in some way we've got to get some kind of communication going. Is there anything on the list that people want removing, or anything that people would like to say that's kind of like priority A? If you look at page 92, just to give us some kind of guidance. And then we'll come back to that as an online meeting, as Paul suggested, so that it's really just bear that in mind. Think of any issues. So when we do have a meeting in July, if you feed it in, then we can try and pick it up. But it is important that the ideas come from you and are supported by you.
And it would be very useful for the September meet to know what items you want as soon as possible, so we can alert officers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I can't do the water quality one. That he couldn't do this meeting or the next one. So, okay, so we will come back to you on that. Yes, will we just pick a date, or will we do a bit of a doodle poll?
Yeah, I'll get some potential dates.
Okay.
You chair by chairperson and the rest of the ACC to choose a potential date.
Okay, is that all right, everybody? So our next meeting then is scheduled for 19th of September, and that's a 2:30 in the afternoon. Is there anything else anybody wanted to raise? I have to consider it a matter of urgency, but by all means ask. No? Okay, thanks very much for coming. Safe journey home.